I stood in the center of the living room, my thumb nervously rubbing the velvet texture of the small black box in my hand. Inside was a watch, a silver chronograph. It wasn't a Rolex, but I had skipped lunch for 6 months to afford it. The cheap vanilla candles I'd bought from the dollar store flickered on the dining table, casting long, dancing shadows against the beige walls. The roast chicken sat in the center, cooling rapidly. It was our 5th anniversary. 5 years of scraping by, 5 years of loving Daniel more than I loved myself. The sound of a key scratching against the lock made me jump. I straightened my dress, a simple blue thing he used to say matched my eyes and forced a bright smile onto my face. The door swung open. "Happy anniversary!" I exclaimed, taking a step forward. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't even look at the table. He stepped inside, letting the door slam shut behind him. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. "Daniel?" I lowered the box slightly. "Honey, come in, take your shoes off." I made. "I'm keeping them on," he interrupted, his voice flat. I froze. "What? You're tracking mud onto the rug." "Just take them off, relax. I know you're tired from work, but—" "I said I'm keeping them on, Maya." He snapped, the volume of his voice making me flinch. "Stop fussing over the damn rug." I took a step back, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He stood by the door, his hands deep in his pockets, looking at me not with love, but with something that looked terrifyingly like annoyance. "You're scaring me," I whispered. "Is everything okay? Did something happen at the office?" He let out a short, cruel laugh. "The office is fine." "The office is perfect, actually. That's the problem. I spend all day around winners, around people who are going places. And then I come home ... to this." He gestured vaguely at our small apartment, at the candles, at me. "To this?" I felt a lump form in my throat. "This is our home, Daniel? We built this." "No," he shook his head, his eyes cold. "We settled for this. You are happy with this. I'm not. Not anymore." "I don't understand," I stammered, holding the gift out like a shield. "I bought you a gift. It's the watch you wanted." He looked at the box with disdain. "I don't want your watch, Maya. I don't want your roast chicken. I don't want any of it." "Daniel, please," I begged, tears pricking my eyes. "We can talk about this. If you're unhappy, we can fix it. We promised." "Promises made by a stupid 25-year-old kid don't count," he cut me off. "Marrying you ... it was a mistake of my youth. I was lonely, I was broke, and you were safe. But I've outgrown safe, Maya. I've outgrown you." The words hit me like physical blows. Mistake of his youth. "I worked 2 jobs to put you through business school," I said, my voice trembling. "I sacrificed everything for you." "And I'm grateful," he said robotically. "But gratitude isn't love. It's a debt, and I'm done paying it." He reached for the doorknob behind him. "Where are you going?" I gasped, panic seizing my chest. "Daniel, you can't just leave. It's our anniversary." "I'm leaving, Maya, tonight." He looked me dead in the eye. "And I'm not leaving alone. She's waiting in the car." "She?" The word tasted like ash. "Chloe," he said, and the name sounded like a knife slicing through the last thread of my hope. "She understands the man I am now. You only know the loser I used to be." He turned and walked out into the night without looking back. I stood there, the velvet box slipping from my numb fingers and crashing to the floor, the sound echoing in the silence of my shattered life. I didn't stop at the door. I couldn't. My feet moved before my brain could process the humiliation burning my cheeks. "Daniel, wait," I screamed, stumbling down the porch steps. The cold evening air bit at my bare arms, but I didn't feel it. I only felt the desperate need to make him stop, to make him say this was a sick joke. He was already halfway down the driveway, walking with a stride I hadn't seen in years, purposeful, arrogant. He didn't turn around. "Go back inside, Maya," he called out over his shoulder, his voice bored. "Don't embarrass yourself." "Embarrass myself?" I caught up to him, grabbing his sleeve. "You're leaving your wife on our anniversary. You owe me an explanation." He ripped his arm away with enough force that I stumbled back. "I told you. I'm done." Then headlights blinded me. Parked at the curb, idling with a low, expensive purr, was a sleek red sports car. It looked like a spaceship compared to my rusted sedan. The passenger door opened and a woman stepped out. She didn't look like me. She was tall, blonde, and wearing a white trench coat that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She held a large umbrella not for herself but to shield her perfectly styled hair. "Daniel, honey," she said. Her voice was smooth like expensive chocolate. "Is this going to take long? The reservation is at 8, and you know how Daddy gets if we're late." "Daddy?" I whispered, looking between them. She turned her gaze to me. It wasn't hate I saw in her blue eyes. It was pity. The kind of pity you give a stray dog you have no intention of feeding. "You must be Maya," she said, offering a sad little smile. "I'm Chloe. Daniel has told me." "Well, he's told me how hard you try." "How hard I try," I choked out, looking at Daniel. "Is that what I am to you? A trier?" Daniel moved to Chloe's side, taking the umbrella from her and holding it over her head, leaving me exposed to the drizzle starting to fall. "Look at her, Maya," Daniel said, gesturing to Chloe like she was a trophy. "Chloe is 23. She has energy. She has life. Her father can introduce me to investors I've been trying to email for 5 years. With her, I'm a CEO in the making. With you? I'm just a guy with a mortgage and a tired wife. I supported you when you were nobody." I screamed, the tears finally spilling over and mixing with the rain. "I paid the rent. I bought your suits. And I appreciate the charity," Daniel sneered, his face twisting. "Speaking of which, keep the apartment." "I don't want it. The lease is in your name anyway. I don't need anything from that small, sad life anymore." "You're leaving me for money?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I'm leaving you for a future," he corrected. He opened the car door for Chloe. She slid in gracefully, tucking her coat around her legs. Before she closed the door, she looked up at me one last time. "You should go inside, Maya. You're ruining your hair." The car door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Daniel," I yelled, stepping toward the window. He didn't look at me. He put the car in gear, the engine roared, and they sped off, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. I watched the red taillights blur and fade into the distance until there was nothing left but the dark, empty street. I stood there for a long time. The rain soaked through my dress, chilling me to the bone, but the cold inside my chest was worse. Slowly, I turned and walked back into the house. The living room was exactly as I had left it minutes ago, but it felt like a museum of a dead woman's life. The candles had burned low, dripping wax onto the table. The roast chicken sat there, congealed and pathetic. The anniversary card I had written filled with words about forever and soulmates sat propped against the salt shaker. I walked to the table and picked up the card. I read the words to my loving husband. "He never loved you," I whispered to the empty room. "He used you." The silence of the house pressed against my ears. It was deafening. My identity, Maya the wife, Maya the supporter, Maya the partner, had been erased in the span of 10 minutes. I was just Naya, and I had no idea who that was. A bubble of heat rose in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was fire? I grabbed the plate with the roast chicken and hurled it against the wall. The ceramic shattered, sending food and shards flying everywhere. "I hate you," I screamed, my voice raw, tearing at my throat. I grabbed the candles, the tablecloth, the anniversary card, and swept them all onto the floor in a crash of glass and wax. I sank to my knees in the mess, gasping for air, clutching my chest as if I could physically hold my heart together. He was gone. And he had taken my dignity with him. For 3 days, I hadn't left the couch. The blinds were drawn, sealing me in a tomb of gray light and stale air. I wore the same oversized t-shirt I'd slept in the night Daniel left, crying until my eyes were swollen shut. A sharp, authoritative knock on the door shattered the silence. I flinched, pulling the blanket tighter around me. "Go away," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The knocking came again, harder this time. Bang, 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 and knocking came again, harder this time. "Maya, open this door immediately." I froze. I knew that voice. It was Mrs. Harrow, Daniel's mother. A flicker of pathetic hope sparked in my chest. Maybe she was here to tell me Daniel had made a mistake. Maybe she was here to comfort me. I stumbled to the door, unlocking it with shaking hands. Mrs. Harrow stood on the porch, clutching a pristine leather handbag. She didn't look at my tear-stained face or my messy hair. She looked past me, wrinkling her nose as she surveyed the darkened living room. "It smells like misery in here," she said, stepping inside without an invitation. "Mrs. Harrow," I managed, leaning against the doorframe for support. "Daniel ... he left. He's with someone else." "I am aware," she said coldly, snapping her purse shut. "He called me. He sounded happier than I've heard him in years. My stomach dropped. Happy? Yes, happy. He's finally with a woman who matches his potential, she said, her eyes scanning me up and down with open disdain. Chloe is vibrant. She comes from a good family. Honestly, Maya, you were always a bit plain for a hero. We tolerated you because Daniel was stubborn, but let's be real, you were holding him back. I felt like I'd been slapped. I loved him. I supported him. Love doesn't pay the bills or secure a legacy, she scoffed. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stiff white envelope. She shoved it against my chest. What is this? I asked, my fingers trembling as I took it. An eviction notice, she stated flatly. This apartment is in my name, purchased from my son and his family. Since you are no longer his family, you are trespassing. You have 1 week to vacate the premises. 1 week? I gasped. But I have nowhere to go. I spent all our savings on the car payments and his debts. Not my problem, she said, turning to inspect a speck of dust on the mantel. I'd suggest you start packing instead of whining. It's unbecoming. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only number that mattered. Maya? Sarah's voice rang out loud and panicked. I've been texting you for days. Are you okay? She's kicking me out, Sarah, I sobbed into the receiver, sliding down the wall to the floor. His mother, she's here. She gave me a week. I'm on my way, Sarah growled. Don't you dare sign anything. Don't you dare let that witch see you cry anymore. Give me 10 minutes. True to her words, Sarah burst through the door 9 minutes later. She didn't hug me. She marched right up to Mrs. Harrow, who was busy judging my spice rack in the kitchen. You, Sarah pointed a finger at her. You are a monster. Mrs. Harrow smirked. And you are loud. Maya, tell your friend to help you pack. I want the keys on the counter by next Sunday. Mrs. Harrow swept out of the room, leaving a cloud of expensive, suffocating perfume in her wake. Sarah crouched down in front of me, grabbing my shoulders. Her grip was tight, grounding me. Look at me, Sarah ordered. We are not going to sit here and rot. You are going to get up, shower, and we are going to pack. I can't, I whispered. I have nothing left. You have you, Sarah said fiercely. And you have me. We are going to pack everything that is yours. Every plate you bought, every towel. Every single thing you paid for while that leech husband of yours was playing pretend CEO. We are leaving this place empty. We spent the next few hours in a frenzy. Sarah played loud music to drown out my sniffling. We filled boxes with a vengeance. When Mrs. Harrow returned later that evening to check on the progress, the living room was stacked high with brown cardboard boxes. I stood by the door, holding the last box, my baking supplies. Mrs. Harrow stood by her car, looking at the pile with a sneer. Good riddance, she muttered. I looked at her. For the first time in 3 days, I didn't feel like crying. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. She thought I was trash. She thought I was disposable. I'm leaving, I said, my voice steady for the first time. But don't worry, Mrs. Harrow, you won't have to tolerate plain ever again. Because the next time you see me, I won't be the girl you can kick around. I turned my back on her, got into Sarah's car, and didn't look back. The stairs creaked ominously under my feet as I lugged my single suitcase up to the attic. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the gloom. The air smelled of abandonment and dry wood. It's not the Ritz, Maya, a raspy voice called from the bottom of the stairs. I turned to see Grandma Elena climbing slowly, her hand gripping the railing tight. She wore a faded floral dress and smelled, as she always did, cinnamon and old books. It's perfect, Grandma, I lied, setting my bag down on the bare, scuffed floorboards. Thank you for taking me in. I didn't know where else to go. She reached the top, her sharp hazel eyes scanning my red, puffy face. She didn't offer a hug. Instead, she poked my arm with a bony finger. You look like a wet cat, she stated bluntly. I feel like one, I admitted, my voice cracking. Daniel took everything. The house, the car, my dignity. Mrs. Harrow kicked me out like I was trash. I have nothing. And you let her? Elena asked, raising a gray eyebrow. What choice did I have? I have no money, no job, and nothing without him. Stop that, she snapped. The harshness of her tone startled me. You are my granddaughter. That is not nothing, and you have hands, don't you? She reached into the deep pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of white fabric. She tossed it at me. I caught it reflexively. It was an apron. What is this for? I asked, unfolding the stiff cotton. Rent? She said simply. I'm too old to let this building rot. The cafe downstairs has been closed for 5 years. It's time to open the doors again. Grandma, I can't, I protested, panic rising in my chest. I don't know how to run a business. I just lost my entire life. I can't just bake muffins while my heart is breaking. You lost a husband, Maya. You didn't lose your life unless you decide to stop living it, she said, her voice softening just a fraction, though her eyes remained steel. Cry today if you must, tears are fine for a day. But action is required for a lifetime. Are you going to drown in your self-pity, or are you going to swim? I looked at the apron in my hands. It was stained with old coffee and flour from years ago. It felt real. I don't want to drown, I whispered. Good, meet me downstairs in 10 minutes. Bring a bucket. She turned and marched back down, her footsteps heavy and determined. An hour later, I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing layers of grime off the checkerboard floor. My muscles ached. My sweat mixed with the tears I refused to let fall. I moved to the counter, finding a bag of flour Grandma had bought. I needed to hit something. I poured water and flour into a bowl, mixing it furiously. I punched the dough, pretending it was Daniel's smug face. Punch, that was for the watch. Punch, that was for the eviction. Punch, that was for Chloe's pity. As the dough became smooth and elastic under my hands, my breathing slowed. My arms were tired, but my mind was clear. For the first time in a week, I didn't feel weak. I felt useful. I looked at the dough rising on the table. I wasn't just a discarded wife hiding in an attic. I was a woman with work to do. I smoothed the wrinkles in my thrift store blouse for the 10th time, catching my reflection in the glass doors of the city council building. I looked exhausted. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun that screamed, I gave up 3 hours ago, and the dark circles under my eyes were darker than the cheap coffee I was clutching. Please, just let this work, I whispered to myself, pushing through the heavy doors. I was running late for my appointment with the zoning department. I checked my watch, the cheap plastic one I bought to replace the anniversary gift, and picked up my pace. I rounded the corner, staring at the room number on a crumpled piece of paper, and slammed straight into a solid wall of expensive dark wool. Hot coffee sloshed over the rim of my cup, splashing onto my hand and more horrifyingly onto the cuff of the stranger's pristine suit jacket. Unbelievable, a deep baritone voice rumbled above me. I looked up. He was tall, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and eyes the color of steel. He looked like he owned the building, or perhaps the entire city block, and he looked furious. I am so sorry, I gasped, fumbling for a napkin in my pocket. I was in a rush, I didn't see. Clearly, he interrupted, his voice dripping with ice. He pulled his arm away before I could touch it, inspecting the small brown stain with a look of absolute disgust. Do people just stop using their eyes when they enter this building? Or is spatial awareness a luxury you can't afford? Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or the stress of the cafe, or the memory of Daniel's sneer, but I wasn't going to take it. I straightened my spine, meeting his glare. It was an accident. And maybe if you weren't taking up the entire center of the hallway like you owned the place, I would have had room to pass. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. The irritation didn't leave his face, but a flicker of something else surprise, maybe intrigue passed through them. You have a sharp tongue for someone wearing ... double quotes. He glanced at my worn sneakers. ... those. My shoes work just fine, I retorted, clutching my half-empty cup. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to save. I stormed past him, my heart pounding in my throat. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me until I turned the corner. The victory was short-lived. Application denied, the clerk behind the counter said 10 minutes later, barely looking up from his computer. What? I gripped the counter. Why? Grandma said the paperwork was all there. You're missing the structural integrity sign-off from a certified engineer, he droned. Come back when you have it. The wait list for review is 6 weeks. 6 weeks? I felt the blood drain from my face. We don't have 6 weeks. We open in 10 days. Please, isn't there anything? Next, he shouted, looking past me. I walked out of the building feeling heavy, like gravity had doubled. 6 weeks meant no opening meant no income. No income meant Grandma lost the building. I had failed. I returned to the cafe, the smell of dust and despair greeting me. Grandma Elena was wiping down the counter. Well? She asked, not looking up. They denied it, I said, my voice hollow. Missing paperwork, they said 6 weeks, Grandma. We're finished. Are we? She stopped wiping and pointed to a thick envelope sitting on the counter. A courier just dropped this off. Said it was urgent. I frowned, picking it up. It was heavy, expensive paper. I tore it open. Inside was a document with the city council seal, permit approved. Expedited status. My mouth fell open. How? I just left there. They said no. I looked at the bottom of the cover letter. It wasn't signed by the clerk. It was a letter from a law firm attached to the permit stating they had handled the clerical error. Henderson and Wright, attorneys at law. Authorized by L. Wright. I froze. The man in the hallway. The suit. The arrogance. L. Wright, I whispered, tracing the signature. Who is that? Grandma asked, peering over my shoulder. I think, I said, a strange shiver running down my spine. It's the man I just yelled at. Order up. 2 cappuccinos, 1 lavender latte, and 3 cinnamon rolls. Sarah shouted over the hiss of the espresso machine. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist, grabbing the tray of fresh rolls from the oven. The blast of heat hit my face, smelling of yeast and caramelized sugar. Coming, I yelled back. Tell table 4 their soufflé is 2 minutes out. The kitchen was a war zone, but it was a beautiful one. Flour coated the floor like snow, and the air was thick with the scent of vanilla and roasted coffee beans. For 3 months, this had been my life, 18 hours a day. My feet throbbed, my back ached, and my hands were covered in tiny burns. But for the first time since the anniversary, I didn't have time to cry. You're a machine, Maya, Grandma Elena said, passing me a clean whisk. You've been on your feet since 4 this morning. Sit down. I can't, I said, quickly frosting a cupcake. We have a line out the door, Grandma. We're actually making money. We're not just making money, Sarah said, bursting into the kitchen with empty plates. We're going viral. Look at this. She shoved her phone in my face. It was a video of our signature revenge chocolate cake, dark, rich, and dusted with gold leaf. It had thousands of likes. People are driving from the next town over just to try it, Sarah grinned. You're not just a baker, babe. You're a business mogul. I laughed, a sound that felt foreign in my throat. I'm just trying to pay the rent, Sarah, but we should look into that wholesale deal for the flour. If we buy in bulk, we save 15%, and we need to hire a part-time dishwasher for weekends. Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Who are you? What? You just talked about margins and hiring, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. 3 months ago, you couldn't decide what to order for dinner without asking Daniel. The name hung in the air for a second. The kitchen noise seemed to dampen. Necessity changes people, I said quietly, turning back to the dough. Pass me the salt. Sarah hesitated, then looked at her phone again. Her expression shifted from excitement to guilt. She tried to slide the phone into her pocket, but I saw the screen. Let me see, I said, holding out my flour-dusted hand. You don't want it, Maya, trust me. Give it here, Sarah. She sighed and handed it over. It was a photo on Instagram. Daniel and Chloe. They were on a yacht somewhere with impossibly blue water. Chloe was wearing a white bikini and laughing, her hand resting possessively on Daniel's shoulder. He looked tanned, holding a glass of champagne. Caption, living our best life. No baggage. Hashtag SOULMATES. I stared at the screen. I waited for the familiar crushing weight to collapse my lungs. I waited for the tears. But they didn't come. Instead, I felt a dull, distant throb. Like a bruise that was turning yellow, ugly but healing. He got a hair transplant, I noted, zooming in on the photo. Sarah blinked. What? His hairline, it's different. He used to be so insecure about it. I handed the phone back. He looks ... plastic. That's it? Added the phone back. He looks ... plastic. Sarah asked, watching me closely. No screaming? No throwing plates? I don't have time to throw plates, I said, picking up my piping bag. I have a business to run, and honestly, he looks exhausting. Later that night, after we flipped the sign to closed and scrubbed the counters down, I went to the small bathroom in the back. I splashed cold water on my face and looked in the chipped mirror. I looked terrible. My apron was stained with dairy compote, my hair was a frizzy mess, and I had dark circles under my eyes. But the woman staring back at me wasn't the hollow ghost who had been left in the rain. Her eyes were bright. They were focused. I did this, I whispered to my reflection. Not Daniel. Not luck, me. I was tired, yes, but I was alive. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by who loved me. I was defined by what I built. The rain lashed against the cafe windows, turning the world outside into a gray, watery blur. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon. The usual rush of college students and tired moms had vanished, leaving the shop quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic drumming of the storm. Go home, Sarah, I said, wiping down the espresso machine. There's no point in both of us standing here watching the rain. You sure? Sarah asked, untying her apron. I don't mind staying. You look pensive. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. Go. As the bell chimed, signaling Sarah's exit, I turned my attention to the only customer left in the shop. He sat in the far corner, his back to the wall, nursing a black coffee. He had been there for an hour, typing furiously on a tablet. I knew that posture. I knew those broad shoulders clad in a suit that cost more than my car. I took a deep breath, grabbed the pot of fresh brew, and walked over to his table. Refill? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Liam stopped typing. He looked up, his steel gray eyes locking onto mine. He didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either, he just nodded. Please, I poured the steaming liquid into his cup. I never got the chance to thank you, I said, setting the pot down. For what? He asked, feigning ignorance. The permit, I said. I saw the signature. Oh, right, you pulled strings for a woman who spilled coffee on your cuff and yelled at you in a hallway. Why? He took a slow sip of his coffee, watching me over the rim. I didn't do it for you, Maya. I did it because the city council is incompetent and I despise incompetence. Is that it? I challenged, crossing my arms. Just a crusade against bureaucracy? He set the cup down. A ghost of a smirk played on his lips. And because you didn't cry. Excuse me? Most people in that hallway cry, he said, leaning back. They beg. They make excuses. You stood your ground. You were angry. I respect anger. It gets things done. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something else. Recognition. Well, I said, smoothing my apron. Thank you. We would have lost the building without it. The coffee is good, he said abruptly, changing the subject. Better than the sludge we get at the firm. Which brings me to why I'm actually sitting here in a monsoon. You didn't come for the atmosphere? I came for a solution, he corrected. My firm, Henderson & Wright, is hosting a partners' dinner next Friday. 50 guests. High profile. Our usual caterer canceled this morning due to a disagreement with Mr. Henderson. And you want me to recommend someone? I asked. I want you to do it? I froze. Me? Liam, I run a small cafe. I bake muffins and make sandwiches. I don't do corporate galas. Food is food, Maya, he said, his gaze intense. I've seen your reviews. I've tasted your pastry. You have standards. Can you handle 50 people, or are you just a small-town baker? The challenge hung in the air. My old instinct, the one trained by 5 years of Daniel telling me I wasn't enough, screamed at me to say no. It's too big. You'll fail. You'll embarrass yourself. But then I looked at Liam. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was measuring me. He was offering a transaction between equals. I'm not just a baker, I said, my voice hardening. What's the budget? He raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Budget isn't the issue. Quality is. Mr. Henderson is a perfectionist. If the food is cold or the presentation is sloppy, he will let you know, loudly. I can handle perfectionists, I said. I was married to a narcissist for 5 years. Then we have a deal? He extended a hand. I looked at his large, well-manicured hand. Shaking it felt like crossing a line. I was stepping out of the safe little world I had built in the attic and into the lion's den. I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. We have a deal, I said. Good, he stood up, buttoning his jacket. Don't make me regret this, Maya. I won't, I replied. He nodded once, turned, and walked out into the rain. I stood there, my hands still tingling from the handshake. A terrifying thrill shot through me. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was ambition. For the first time, I wasn't just trying to keep my head above water. I was learning to swim with sharks, and strangely, I wasn't scared. I was ready. Careful with that tray, I shouted, lunging forward to study a tower of cake boxes. Jessica, are the mousse cups in the cooler? Yes, chef, Jessica chirped, her ponytail bouncing. She was 20, eager, and had been a godsend during the prep week. Or so I thought. We were standing in the industrial kitchen of the Henderson and Wright headquarters. It was stainless steel, cold, and terrifyingly large. The sounds of clattering pans and sizzling ovens filled the air. Okay, final quality check, I said, grabbing a plastic spoon. Let's taste the chocolate mousse before we start plating. Consistency is key. I dipped the spoon into the mixing bowl, anticipating the rich, dark sweetness I perfected over 3 sleepless nights. I put it in my mouth. My eyes instantly watered. I gagged, spitting the mixture into the nearest sink. Water. I choked, clawing at my throat. Oh my God, what is it? Sarah rushed over, dropping a towel. Is it spoiled? Salt, I gasped, scraping my tongue with my teeth. It's pure salt. Who prepped this batch? The kitchen went deadly silent. Sarah, the 2 temp washers, and I all turned to look at Jessica. I used the bin marked sugar, she stammered, backing away toward the door. I swear, I just followed the label. I ran to the dry storage rack. The bin labeled sugar was filled to the brim with coarse kosher salt. The actual sugar was hidden on the very top shelf behind the flour. You labeled these bins, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You prepped the dry goods yesterday. No one else touched them. It was a mistake. Jessica cried, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit. Wait a minute, Sarah said, stepping forward and grabbing Jessica's arm. I saw you yesterday, in the alley behind the cafe. You were talking to a woman, older, expensive suit, face like a bulldog? My blood ran cold. Mrs. Harrow? Jessica yanked her arm free, her face flushing red. I don't know what you're talking about. This job is too stressful. I quit. She turned and sprinted out the back door, the heavy metal slamming shut with a clang that echoed like a prison cell closing. We're dead, Sarah said, her voice trembling as she looked into the bowl. Maya, dinner service starts in 20 minutes. That was 50 servings of dessert. We have nothing. I sank against the counter, sliding down until I hit the floor. Mrs. Harrow. She couldn't just take my home. She wanted to take my livelihood. She wanted me to fail in front of Liam. She wanted to prove I was nothing. I can't do this, I whispered, burying my face in my hands. It's over. Maya? Sarah's voice was gentle but scared. Tears are fine for a day, but action is required for a lifetime. Grandma Elena's voice cut through the panic in my brain. I looked up. I looked at the salty mousse. I looked at the pot of caramel sauce simmering on the stove. No, I said, standing up. My legs shook, but my voice didn't. We're not dead. Maya, it's inedible, Sarah argued. We can't serve salt blocks. Exactly, I said, grabbing a whisk. It's not ruined chocolate. It's the base for a salted dark chocolate tart. Sarah, get the caramel. Pour it in. We're pivoting. Are you crazy? I'm desperate, I snapped, tying my apron tighter. And I'm not letting that witch win. Melt the butter, now. The next 20 minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. We folded gallons of caramel into the salty mixture, balancing the brine with aggressive sweetness. I piped the new mixture into the tart shells with shaking hands, praying the ratio worked. Service! The head waiter called from the pass. I watched the first plates go out. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wiped a smear of chocolate from my cheeks, staring at the swinging doors. Please, I whispered. Please be sweet enough. I wasn't just serving dessert. I was serving my survival. Clean plates. Sarah shouted, bursting through the swinging doors with a stack of empty china. Maya, look. They licked them clean. I leaned against the stainless steel prep table, my knees finally giving way. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by empty flour sacks and dirty whisk attachments. My heart was still racing a mile a minute. They liked it? I asked, my voice barely a squeak. They didn't taste the panic? Taste the panic? Sarah laughed, grabbing a leftover tart shell and biting into it. Maya, they think you're a genius. One of the partners asked if the aggressive salinity was a commentary on modern corporate greed. I told him yes. I let out a hysterical giggle, burying my face in my hands. Aggressive salinity. Oh my God. The kitchen door swung open again, but this time the heavy thud of expensive dress shoes silenced the room. Liam stood there. He had removed his suit jacket, his tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up. He looked relaxed. Who, he asked, his voice booming slightly in the tiled room, is responsible for the dessert? I scrambled to my feet, wiping my sticky hands on my apron. I am. Liam, if it was too salty, I can explain. It was extraordinary, he interrupted, stepping closer. I blinked. What? Mr. Henderson ate too, Liam said, a glint of amusement in his eyes. He said it was the boldest thing he's tasted in 10 years. He wants to know where you trained. I trained in my grandmother's attic, I stammered. Well, keep it up, he said. He looked around the chaotic kitchen, then back at me. You saved the night, Maya, and you did it with a skeleton crew and a saboteur in your ranks. I'm impressed. I just did what I had to do, I said, feeling a blush creep up my neck. Most people would have folded, he said quietly. Then something happened that stopped my breath. The corners of his mouth twitched and he smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. He looked younger, lighter. I have a proposition, he said. A proposition? Henderson and Wright is looking to invest in local businesses, he said, crossing his arms. I want to invest in you. Not just catering, a bistro, a real location. You have the talent, Maya, you just need the capital. You want to be my partner? I asked, stunned. I want to help you build an empire, he corrected. What do you say? I opened my mouth to answer, but a vibration in my pocket stopped me, my phone. 1 second, I apologized, pulling it out. I looked at the screen. The name flashing there sent a jolt of electricity through my veins, but not the good kind. Daniel. Message. Can we talk? I saw the photos of your cafe online. You look ... different. I stared at the words. 6 months of silence. 6 months of him living his best life while I scraped burnt sugar off baking sheets. And now, the moment I get a win, he senses it. Like a shark smelling blood or a parasite sensing a host. Bad news? Liam asked, watching my expression darken. I looked from the phone to Liam. Daniel was the past, a small, suffocating room where I was never enough. Liam was the future, a wide-open door where I was extraordinary. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sadness. I felt power. No, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket without replying. Just spam. Good, Liam said. He walked over to a cooling rack where a bottle of champagne was chilling and a bucket of ice stolen from the bar for the kitchen staff. He popped the cork with expert ease and poured 2 plastic cups. He handed one to me. To aggressive salinity, he toasted. I clinked my plastic cup against his. To building empires, I took a sip. It tasted like victory. The bell above the door jangled, a cheerful sound that usually made me smile. I looked up from the espresso machine, wiping steam from the wand. My smile vanished instantly. Daniel stood in the doorway. He didn't look like the man who had sped away in a sports car 6 months ago. His expensive gray suit was wrinkled at the elbows, his tie was loosened haphazardly, and there were bags under his eyes deep enough to carry groceries. He looked gray. 1 black coffee, he said, walking to the counter. His voice lacked its usual booming arrogance. $3, I said, keeping my face blank. He fumbled with his wallet, dropping a credit card before retrieving it. He paid, his fingers lingering near mine for a second too long. I pulled back sharply. Can I sit? He asked, gesturing to an empty table near the window. Please, Maya, just 5 minutes, I sighed, grabbing a rag. I have work to do, Daniel. Just 5 minutes, he repeated, his voice sounding thin. I poured the coffee and followed him to the table. I remained standing, scrubbing a spot on the table that was already clean. This place is nice, he said, looking around at the fresh flowers and the busy customers. You've done well. Better than I expected. Thanks, I said dryly. Is there a point to this visit, or are you just doing a health inspection? He took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. Chloe hates coffee. She only drinks imported green juice. She makes me drink it too. It tastes like grass. Sounds healthy, I muttered. It's exhausting, he snapped, the veneer cracking. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Everything with her is a production. Her father watches my every move at the company. If I'm 5 minutes late, I get a lecture. I can't breathe, Maya. I come home and she's screaming about some gala or some dress I forgot to pick up. He looked up at me, his eyes softening into a look that used to make my knees weak. Now it just looked pathetic. I miss the quiet, he whispered. I miss your roast chicken, I miss. How simple you were. I stopped wiping the table. Simple? You know what I mean, you were easy. You didn't ask for much. You let me be the man. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Maybe we made a mistake, Maya. Maybe we gave up too soon. You've proven you can step up. We could be a real power couple now. I looked at his hand covering mine. The heat of his skin didn't spark love. It sparked revulsion. I snatched my hand back as if he were a hot stove. Don't touch me. Maya, come on, he pleaded, leaning forward. We had 5 years. Doesn't that mean anything? I'm unhappy. Doesn't that matter to you? I stared at him. Suddenly, the image of the powerful, ambitious husband I had mourned vanished. In his place sat a leech. A man who jumped from host to host, first me, then Chloe, and now that Chloe was difficult, he wanted to crawl back to the easy option to feed his ego. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice steady and cold. You didn't come here because you miss me. You came here because your new life is hard and you want your servant back. That's not fair, he scowled, his face reddening. Life isn't fair, Daniel, you taught me that. I stood up straighter, looking down at him. Now, unless you are going to buy a pastry, you need to leave. This table is for paying customers. You're kicking me out? He asked, incredulous. I'm asking you to leave my establishment, I corrected. Go home to your rich wife, Daniel. You chose her. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He glared at me, trying to summon his old dominance, but it failed. You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. I'm everything without you, I replied calmly. He stormed out, the bell jingling angrily behind him. I watched him go, waiting for the familiar pang of sadness. I waited for the doubt to creep in. But it didn't come. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of coffee and freedom. I felt lighter than air. Turn it up, Sarah, I said, pausing with a wet rag in my hand. The news anchor's voice filled the sudden quiet of the cafe. Double quotes ... massive fraud investigation into the Sterling Group. The CEO has stepped down, but sources indicate that the newly appointed CFO, Daniel Harrow, is the primary suspect in the embezzlement scheme. My hand froze on the counter. CFO? He finally got the title he wanted. Crash. The cafe door flew open so hard it hit the wall. It wasn't a customer. It was Chloe. She looked like a train wreck. The sleek, polished woman who had sneered at me from the sports car was gone. Her designer coat was unbuttoned, her hair was a bird's nest, and mascara ran down her cheeks in black rivers. You, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this. You cursed us. The customers gasped. I stepped out from behind the counter, wiping my hands. Chloe? I asked calmly. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent. She shrieked, stomping her heel like a toddler. Ever since we left you, everything has gone wrong. The investments failed, the car was repossessed, and now this. She gestured wildly at the TV screen above the register. My father is ruining him. She sobbed, the anger dissolving into hysterical tears. Daniel ... that idiot. He signed everything. My dad told him it was standard procedure for the promotion, and he signed it all without reading a single page. He's going to prison, Maya. He signed legal documents without reading them, I asked. I felt a strange lack of surprise. Daniel always cared more about the appearance of power than the actual work. He wanted the corner office. Chloe wailed, grabbing a napkin holder and throwing it on the floor. He wanted this status. And now he's the fall guy. He's going to lose everything. And I am not going down with him. She looked around the cafe, her eyes wild and desperate. I'm done, she shouted to the room, her voice cracking. I'm not a prison wife. I'm filing for an annulment today. He's broke, he's useless, and he's your problem again. No, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a knife. He's not. I looked at Sarah, who was already rolling up her sleeves. Sarah, please show her out. She's disturbing the customers. With pleasure, Sarah muttered. She grabbed Chloe's arm firmly. Let's go, princess. Party's over. Get off me. Chloe screamed as Sarah dragged her toward the door. You're all jealous. You're all. The door slammed shut, cutting off her screeching. The silence returned to the cafe, heavier than before. I turned back to the TV. They were showing a clip of Daniel being led out of an office building in handcuffs. He looked terrified. He looked small. He's looking at 10 years minimum, a deep voice said beside me. I turned. Liam was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, watching the screen. Unless he gets a very expensive lawyer, Liam added, his tone professional. I can make a call or you could. He looked at me, his gray eyes searching mine. It was a test. Do you want to help him, Maya? He asked softly. You have the money now. You could bail him out. You could save him. I looked at the screen one last time. I remembered the rain on the night of our anniversary. I remembered him telling me I was a mistake of his youth. He wanted the high stakes. He wanted the fast lane. He just crashed. He walked away, Liam, I said, turning my back on the television. He wanted to be the man who makes the big decisions. Well, he made one. I picked up the rag and started wiping the counter again. No, I said firmly. He made his choices. Let him live with them. Liam smiled, a genuine, warm expression that made my heart flutter. I was hoping you'd say that. To the Gilded Crumb. Sarah shouted, raising her champagne flute high in the air. To the Gilded Crumb. The crowd roared back. I smiled, the flash of cameras blinding me for a split second. I stood in the center of the room, wearing a deep emerald gown that fit perfectly, a stark contrast to the oversized t-shirts I used to hide in, my second location. A high-end bistro in the city center. You did it, boss, Sarah whispered, squeezing my arm. Look at this place. It's packed. We did it, I corrected her, scanning the room. The chandeliers glittered, the jazz band played softly, and every table was full. Excuse me, Miss Davis? I turned to see the head of security, a large man named Marcus, looking uncomfortable. What is it, Marcus? There's a woman at the door, he said, lowering his voice. She claims to be your mother-in-law. She's causing a scene. My stomach tightened, but only for a second. I'll handle it. I walked to the entrance. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside. There, arguing with the valet, was Mrs. Harrow. But she wasn't the woman who had sneered at my furniture. Her Chanel suit was gone, replaced by a frayed wool coat. Her hair was gray and unkempt. She looked broken. Maya, she gasped when she saw me, pushing past the valet. Oh, thank God. Maya, tell them who I am. I know who you are, I said calmly, crossing my arms. What are you doing here? I needed to see you, she stammered, her eyes darting around nervously. Daniel ... the lawyers took everything. The house, the accounts, I'm staying in a motel, Maya, a motel. Maya, motel. I thought ... since you're doing so well, maybe you could help family? Family? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. You told me I wasn't family the day you handed me an eviction notice. You told me I was too plain to be a hero. I was stressed. She cried, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. Maya, please. I have nowhere to go, just a loan or a job. I can greet people. I looked at her. I searched for the anger that had fueled me for months, but it was gone. I just felt pity. She was a ghost of a life I had already outgrown. No, I said softly, what? She blinked, tears welling in her eyes. I don't have room for you here, I said, my voice steady. My life is full of people who support me, not people who tear me down when it suits them. You made your choice, Mrs. Harrow. Now you have to live with it. I nodded to Marcus. Please escort her off the property. Gently. Maya, you can't do this. She wailed as Marcus guided her away. I just did, I whispered. I turned my back on her and walked back into the warmth of the bistro. I didn't look back. I needed air. I slipped through the crowd and out onto the private balcony overlooking the city skyline. The noise of the party faded into a dull hum. I had a feeling I'd find you here. I didn't jump. I knew that voice. I turned to see Liam leaning against the railing, holding 2 fresh glasses of champagne. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but his eyes were soft. Did you see her? I asked, taking the glass. I saw you handle her, he corrected. You were incredible. I felt mean, I admitted, looking at the city lights. You were strong, he said, stepping closer. There's a difference. You protected your peace. He set his glass down on the ledge and turned to face me fully. The city lights reflected in his steel gray eyes. Maya, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I've watched you build this from nothing. I've seen you covered in flour, crying over permits, and standing tall in front of the press. I don't just admire your success. My breath hitched. What do you admire? I admire your heart, he said, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. His fingers were warm against my skin. I don't want to save you, Maya. You don't need saving. I just want to stand beside you while you conquer the world. I looked at him. With Daniel, I'd always felt like I was auditioning for a role I couldn't get the perfect silent wife. I was a servant in my own marriage. But with Liam, he didn't want a servant. He wanted a partner. I'm not the same girl I was, I whispered. I know, he smiled. I like this woman much better. So do I said. I leaned in, closing the gap between us. When he kissed me, it didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt real. It felt like coming home to a house I'd built with my own 2 hands. Turn right, the GPS instructed. I didn't need the directions, but I liked hearing the robotic confirmation. I slid the car as I passed number 42 on Maple Street. The grass was knee-high, yellowed and dying. The windows were dark. A red bank-owned sign sat crooked in the yard where I used to plant petunias. Goodbye, I whispered. I waited for the pang of loss. I waited for the ghost of the girl who cried on that porch to scream. But there was only silence. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt bored. It was just a house. A box where a stranger used to live. I pressed the gas, driving toward the hills. My new driveway was paved with smooth cobblestones. I parked my SUV paid for in cash and walked up the steps of the sprawling craftsman house I bought 3 months ago. Inside, the house was alive. Maya, finally, Sarah yelled from the living room. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by spreadsheets and fabric swatches. The Tokyo deal? It's happening. They want the franchise rights for the tart. Tokyo? I laughed, dropping my keys in the bowl. Sarah, it's Friday night. Put the laptop away. I will when we sign, she grinned, tossing a grape into her mouth. You're going to be international, babe. Get used to it. Leave her alone, Sarah, Grandma Elena called out. She was sitting in the armchair by the fire, knitting a scarf that looked suspiciously tiny. She looks tired. Come here, darling. I walked over and kissed her cheek. She smelled of lavender and peace. Her cheeks were rosy, her eyes bright. You look happy, Grandma. I am. She patted my hand. My attic is empty, but my heart is full. Plus, this fireplace is much better for my knees. Something smells amazing, I said, sniffing the air. Garlic? Rosemary? That would be the risotto, a deep voice said from the kitchen. Liam walked out. He was wearing an apron over his dress shirt, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He held 2 glasses of white wine. You cooked? I asked, accepting the glass. I attempted to. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Mr. Henderson gave me his secret recipe. If it's bad, blame the senior partner. I'm sure it's perfect, I murmured, leaning into his touch as he kissed my forehead. Dinner is served, he announced. We sat at the large oak table. The room was filled with the clinking of silverware and the sound of Sarah recounting a disastrous date she had last week. Grandma was laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Liam was looking at me, his hand resting gently on my knee under the table. I looked around them. This wasn't a performance. There were no candles lit to hide a cold atmosphere. There were no shoes left on by the door as a power move. There was just warmth. Genuine, messy, loud warmth. Penny for your thoughts? Liam asked softly, squeezing my knee. I looked at him. Then I looked at the reflection of the woman in the dark window pane. She stood tall. She looked content. I was just thinking, I said, my voice steady, about the girl who stood in the rain 2 years ago. She was a mess, Sarah noted, tearing a piece of bread. She was, I agreed. She thought her life was over because a man walked out of it. I took a deep breath, letting the realization settle in my bones. I used to hate Daniel for what he did. I used to hate the betrayal, the humiliation, the way he discarded me like trash. But tonight, surrounded by this imperfect, beautiful family I built, I realized something. I don't hate him. I thank him. If he hadn't broken me, I never would have found the pieces of myself that mattered. I never would have found my spine. I never would have found my empire. And I certainly never would have found this love. He walked away, I said aloud, lifting my glass. He thought he was the protagonist of my life. But he was just the inciting incident. Liam raised his glass, his eyes full of pride. To the heroine. To the heroine, Sarah and Grandma echoed. I smiled, feeling a tear track down my cheek, not of sadness, but of pure relief. I refused to be a victim. I whispered to the room and to the universe, and I found true happiness. The best part? I did it all without him. I took a sip of the wine. It was sweet, crisp, and tasted exactly like freedom.